out in order to get back to where we need to be in order to push the momentum forward. There's a lot of conversations that still need to be had, and the only way that we can start fixing them is to be better examples of ourselves. We have to take accountability for the things that we do and the actions that we have, right? So may 2021 bring justice and peace, the unification and kinship, and bettering one another. We've heard a lot of domestic terrorism, and it's rooted in misogyny and white supremacy. It's also happening in our communities, and we need to stomp that shit out. Without creating and paving a different road, we'll be stuck in our old paths, in the old cycles. When someone is hard to handle or difficult to speak to, remember, this revolution isn't ego-driven. We don't see you the way that you see yourself, and vice versa. See that everyone is going through their own bad dysfunctional cycle of some sort, that we have to recycle that back to one another, whether we hurt each other or whether we help each other. But let's not help each other to say we're helping each other. We fix each other's crowns, not to the way that we see fit, but that fits for them. And we have to give them their own space and make sure that they're safe and they feel loved. Because this shit is bullshit and it needs to stop. Day in and day out, we see what tyranny has fucking done, not just to women, men, and children, but to every single politician or the dollar. And then we allow people to treat us like what? We're valued at $1? It doesn't work like that. No matter what we do, don't ever let anybody treat you like you can be thrown away like a fucking dollar bill. So there's been a lot of people stolen from their stolen land. I want to take a minute just for them. So tell me, what does it look like in heaven? Is it peaceful? Is it free like they say? Does the sun shine bright forever? Have your fears and your pain gone away? 'Cause here on earth, everything's different. There's an emptiness. Whoa, I hope you're dancing in the sky. And I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. And I hope the angels know what they have. I'll bet it's so nice up in heaven since y'all arrived. So tell me, what do you do up in heaven? Are your days filled with love and light? Is there music? Is there art and invention? Tell me, are you happy? Are you more alive?
Should be live, you guys. Let me check my bag real quick. Should be live right now. So now that all the Patriots left, it seems like Antifa is going to come up here and do their thing. This small group here, and that there is a much larger group.
Whoa, Susan.
Oh, I'm looking for coupon codes.
Well, Capital One Shopping.
basic position of the Upanishads is that the self is the one and only reality without a second, that all this universe is finally Brahman and appears to be a multiplicity of different things and different events only by reason of Maya, which is illusion, magic, art, creative power. So then, it is basic to the Vedanta that Brahman, this intangible, non-objective ground of everything that exists, is identical with the ground of you. And this is put in the formula Tattvam Asi. We should translate that into a modern American idiom as "you're it." This, of course, is a doctrine which is very difficult for those brought up in the Judeo-Christian traditions to accept, because it is fundamental to Christian and Jewish theology that whatever you are surely not the Lord God. And Christians feel about the Hindu doctrine that we are all fundamentally masks of God, that it's pantheism, and that's a dirty word in Christian theological circles, because of the feeling that if everything is God, then all moral standards are blown to hell, because it means everything is as good as everything else. Everything that happens is really God, and this must include the good things and the bad things. And that seems to them a very dangerous idea. Actually, all religious doctrines contain very, very dangerous ideas. However, we won't worry about that for the moment, because what the Hindu means by God when he says Brahman is not at all the same thing as a Jew means by the Lord Adonai, because the Jew and the Christian means the boss, to whom divine honors are due as above all others. The Hindu, on the other hand, does not mean the boss. He doesn't mean the king, the Lord, the political ruler of the universe. He means the inmost energy, which, as it were, dances this whole universe, without, as it were, the idea of authority, of governing some intractable element that resists his or its power. So, if a Christian or a person in a Christian culture announces that he has discovered that he is God, we put him in the loony bin, because it's unfashionable to burn people for heresy anymore. But in India, if you announce that you're the Lord God, they say, well, of course, how nice that you found out. Because everybody is. Why the great problem arises, does it appear that we are not?
Yes, yes.
Why do we think? Why do we have the sensory impression that this whole universe consists of a vast multiplicity of different things,
Yes,
and we don't see it all as one?
yes. I love it.
Well, what would you think it would be like to see it all as one? I know a lot of people who study Oriental philosophy hear about attaining these great states of consciousness, nirvana, moksha, which the Hindus use, liberation, satori, Zen Buddhist word for enlightenment or awakening. What would it be like to have that? How would you feel if you saw everything is really one basic reality?
Too many black people are being murdered by the hands of the police. It is time that we take their guns and use them. Use them as a deadly weapon.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Because I'm tired. It's cold outside, but one thing I can say about me is I didn't march through rain, sleet, and snow. That means I can climb through many mountains. I can crawl through many streets. And I can run down many highways. And I'm still going to be on that same mission for justice for Patrick Timmons and all others. I'm not sure how many of you guys attended my last event, but my brainstorm is stuck on our black ancestors right now. Not sure how
Well, a lot of people
you
think
guys know
that it would be as if all the outlines and differentiations in the field of vision suddenly became vague, melted, and we saw only a kind of luminous sea of light. But rather advisedly, the Vedanta philosophy does not really seriously use the word one of the Supreme Self. Because the word and the idea of one has an opposite, many, on one side, and another opposite, none, on the other. And it is fundamental to Vedanta that the Supreme Self is neither one nor many, but, as they say, non-dual.
Because black lives do matter. And when black lives is under attack, what do we do? Stand up like that. When black lives are under attack, what do we do? Stand up like that. When the Red House was under attack, what did we do? Stand up like that. What did we do? Stand up like that. Say that thing. Because black lives matter. We gon' fight, 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 we gon' fight. We gon' chant, we gon' chant, we gon' chant, we gon' chant, we gon' chant. We gon' march, we gon' march, we gon' march, we gon' march, we gon' march. God damn it, till we cannot march no more. You got to keep your feet on fire. You got to, if the rock is hot, baby, let them get hotter.
And they express that in this word, Advaita. Ad is a negative word like non. Advaita is from Dvat, same as the Latin duo, two. So Advaita is non-dual. And this at first for Westerners is a difficult conception.
Yep.
Because you naturally, as a Western logician would say, but the non-dual is the opposite of the dual. Therefore it has an opposite. True. But the Hindu is using this term in a special sense. How in logic, in human rationality, can I possibly think except in terms of opposites? All rational discourse is talk about classification. The classification of experiences, of sensations, of notions. And the nature of a class is that it's a box. And if a box has an inside, it has to have an outside. Is you is, or is you ain't, is fundamental to all classification. And we can't get out of it.
Yeah.
It's almost as if, you see, whatever we see to be different is an explicit difference on the surface, covering an implicit unity. Only, it's very difficult to talk about what it is that unifies black and white. Of course, in a way, the eyes do.
But most of all, we get down.
Sound and silence are unified by the ears. So, you can see, can't you, that if you can't have one without the other, it's like the poles of a magnet, North Pole and South Pole. You can't have a one-pole magnet. True, the poles are quite different. One's north and the other's south. But it's all one magnet. And some such idea as that is what the Hindu is moving into when he's speaking of the real basis or ground of the universe as being non-dual. Take it, the fundamental opposition that I suppose all of us feel between self and other, I and thou, I and it. There is something that is me, There's an area of my experience that I call myself, and there's another area of my experience which I call not myself. But you will immediately see that neither one could be realized without the other. You wouldn't know what you meant by self unless you experience something other than self. You wouldn't know what you meant by other unless you understood self. They go together. They arise at the same time. You don't have first self and then other, or first other and then self. They come together. And that shows, you see, the sneaky conspiracy underneath the two, like the magnet between the two different poles. So more or less that sort of what isn't classifiable, but which lies between all classes. Class of elephants opposite the class of non-elephants has, as it were, the walls of the box joining the two together. Just as your skin is an osmotic membrane that joins you to the external world by virtue of all the tubes in it and the nerve ends and the way in which the external energies flow through your skin into your inside, and vice versa.
Yes, yes. Yep.
But we do, don't we, see and feel and sense, or we think the world as divided into a great multiplicity. A lot of people would think of the universe as a collection of different things, a kind of cosmic flotsam and jetsam washed together in this particular area of space, and prefer to take a pluralistic attitude and don't see anything underlying. In fact, in contemporary logical philosophy, the notion of any basic ground or continuum in which all events occur would be considered meaningless.
We didn't go to the Injustice Center, my brothers and sisters. We will stand up.
If I say that everybody in this universe, every star, every planet, is moving in a certain direction at a uniform speed, that will be saying nothing at all unless I can point out some other object with respect to which they are so moving. But since I said the universe, that includes all objects whatsoever. Therefore, I cannot make a meaningful statement about the uniform behavior of everything that is going on. True. But on the other hand, every sound you hear on the radio, whether it be a honking horn, a Bach sonata, or a newscast, is the vibration of the diaphragm in your loudspeaker. The radio doesn't tell us this. The announcer doesn't come on first thing in the morning and say, ladies and gentlemen, from now until closing time, all the sounds you will hear will be vibrations of the diaphragm in your speaker. That is taken for granted and ignored. So, in the same way, your eardrum is basic to all that you hear. Your lens of the eye and retina is basic to all that you see. What is the color of the lens of the eye? We say it is no color, it is transparent. In the same way as a mirror has no color of its own. But the mirror is very definitely there, colorless as it may be. The eardrum, unheard as it may be, is very definitely basic to all hearing. The eye, transparent as it may be, is very definitely basic to all seeing. So therefore, if there were some continuum in which everything that is going on and everything that we experience occurs, we would not notice it. We would not be able really to say very much about it, except perhaps that it was there. It wouldn't make any difference to anything, except the one all-important difference, that if it wasn't there, there wouldn't be any differences. But you see, philosophers nowadays don't like to think about things like that. It stretches their heads, and they would rather preoccupy themselves with more pedestrian matters. But still, you can't help it. If you're a human being, you wonder about things like that. What is it in which everything is happening? What is the ground? Well, you say, obviously it's not a what, because a thing that is a what is a classifiable thing. And so, very often the Hindu and the Buddhist will refer to the ultimate reality as no thing. Not nothing, but no special thing. Unclassifiable. Can't put your finger on it, but it's you. It's what you basically are. What everything basically is. Just as the sound of an automobile horn on the radio is in one way an automobile horn, but basically it is the vibration of the diaphragm. Okay, so you are all, in the Hindu view, vibrations of the entire cosmic diaphragm. Put it like that. That's analogy. And I'm using saguna language, or cataphatic language, from the point of Christianity. The best language is to say nothing, but to experience it. How can you experience it? Well, that's the whole thing, as I pointed out last time. The nub of all these Oriental philosophies is not an idea, not a theory, not even a way of behaving, but it's basically a way of experiencing, a transformation of everyday consciousness, so that it becomes quite apparent to us that that's the way things are. But when it happens to you, it's very difficult to explain it. So in exactly the same way, when somebody has that sort of breakthrough which transforms his consciousness, and it happens all over the world, it's not just a Hindu phenomenon. When somebody suddenly realizes it's all one, or technically non-dual, and really all this coming and going and all this frantic living and dying, grabbing, struggling, fighting, suffering, all this is a fantastic phantasmagoria. He sees that. But when he tries to explain it, he finds his mouth isn't big enough, because he can't get the words out of their dualistic pattern to explain something non-dualistic. But why is this so? Why are we under this great, magnificent hallucination? Well, the Hindus explain this in saguna language as follows. It's a very nice explanation, a child can understand it. The fact of the matter is that the world is a game of hide and seek. Peekaboo. Now you see it, now you don't. Because, very obviously, if you were the Supreme Self, what would you do? Would you just sit there and be blissfully one and forever and ever and ever? No, obviously not. You would play games. You would, in other words, for the very nature of the fact that I said, no energy system is an energy system unless it lets go of itself. So you would let go of yourself. And you would get lost. And you get involved in all sorts of adventures. And you would forget who you were. Just as when you play a game, playing poker. And although you're only playing for dimes or for chips, you get absorbed in the game. And nothing really important to win, nothing really important to lose, and yet it becomes fantastically interesting. Who wins and who loses? so in the same way it is said that the Supreme Self gets absorbed through ever so many different channels, which we call all the different beings, in the plot, just like an artist or a writer gets completely absorbed in the artistic creation that he's doing, or an actor gets absorbed in the part in the drama. At first we know it's a drama. We go to a play and we say it's only a play, and the proscenium arch tells us that what happens behind that arch is not for real, just a show. Great actor is going to make you forget it's just a show. He's going to have you sitting on the edge of your chair. He's going to have you crying. He's going to have you trembling, because he almost persuades you that it's real. What would happen if the very best actor was confronted by the very best audience? Why, they'd be taken in completely, and the one would confirm the other. So this is the idea of the universe as drama. That the fundamental self, the Saguna, Brahman, plays this game, gets involved in being all of us, and does it so damn well, it's so superbly acted that the thing appears to be real. And we're not only sitting on the edge of our chair, but we start to get up and throw things. We join in the drama, and it all becomes whatever it is that's going on here, see? Then, of course, at the end of the drama, because all things have to have an end that have a beginning, the curtain goes down and the actors retire to the green room. And there, the villain and the hero cease to be villain and hero, and they're just the actor. And then they come out in front of the curtain, and they stand in a row, and the audience applauds the villain along with the hero. The villain for having been a good villain, the hero for having been a great hero. The play is over. And everybody heaves a sigh of relief. Well, that was a great show, wasn't it? So the same idea, the green room is the Nirguna Brahman. That behind the whole show, where there are no differentiations of I and thou, subject and object, good and evil, light and darkness, life and death.
You know, there are astronomers that say there was a primordial explosion, an enormous bang millions of years ago, billions of years ago, which flung all the galaxies into space. Well, let's take that just for the sake of argument and say that was the way it happened. It's like you took a bottle of ink and you threw it at a wall. Smash, and all that ink spreads. And in the middle, it's dense, isn't it? And as it gets out on the edge, the little droplets are finer and finer and make more complicated patterns. See? So in the same way, there was a big bang in the beginning of things, and it spread. And you and I, sitting here in this room, as complicated human beings, are way, way out on the fringe of that bang. We're the complicated little patterns on the end of it. Very interesting. But so we define ourselves as being only that. If you think that you are only inside your skin, you define yourself as one very complicated little curlicue, way out on the edge of that explosion, way out in space and way out in time. Billions of years ago, you were a big bang. But now you're a complicated human being. And then we cut ourselves off like this and don't feel that we're still the Big Bang. But you are. You are actually, if this is the way things started, if there was a Big Bang in the beginning, you're not something that is a result of the Big Bang on the end of the process. You are still the process. You are the Big Bang, the original force of the universe, coming on as whoever you are. See, when I meet you, I see not just what you define yourself as, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so. I see every one of you as the primordial energy of the universe coming on at me in this particular way. I know I'm that too. But we've learned to define ourselves as separate from it. And so what I would call a kind of a basic problem we've got to go through first is to understand that there are no such things as things. That is to say, separate things or separate events. That is only a way of talking. And if you can understand this, you're going to have no further problems.
Talk about the cat.
I once asked a group of high school children, what do you mean by a thing? And first of all, they gave me all sorts of synonyms. They said it's an object, which is simply another word for a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about what you mean by a thing. Finally, a very smart girl from Italy who was in the group said a thing is a noun. And she was quite right. Instead of saying to you, you should be doing it another way than you're doing it, I will be saying, now find out the way you must do it and go that way. Now, this is a general principle of an art. And we will find there is a kind of, there are limits to this art and how it can be used and so forth. But once the general principles are clear, there aren't many serious problems left. That if you begin to look at it in that way, you will begin to realize that ecstasy, by one road or another, is inevitable. That indeed ecstasy is, in a way, the nature of existence. There is a universe for the simple reason that it's ecstatic. What else is all this fireworks about? It is just like music in this ecstatic thing going off. And you have to be certainly careful in a little way here that any initiation into a deep wisdom is apt at first to demotivate you. You think, what the hell am I doing? And all these projects, and building this up and that up, or doing something to save the world, or so on and so forth. Why, the whole thing is nonsense. Yes. If you stick there, that's what they call in Mahayana Buddhism the Pratyeka Buddha. That means the private Buddha, as distinct from Bodhisattva, who comes back into everyday life, as they say, for the liberation of all other sentient beings. Because when you know that all this is all right anyway, and that the situation is inevitable ecstasy, I mean, you're going to get it one way or another. Then you say, well, what was all the fuss about? You know? The fact remains that a lot of people just don't know that. And are really hating life, not knowing how to handle hate. And if you are at a certain point, you know those other people are you. They're like you had an extended body and all these were nerve ends on the end of it, you see. However, you know also that you can't really show them anything they don't already know and won't be able to show them anything else until they know it. But then the question, what shall I do, has now disappeared. It should have disappeared in the beginning, because there wasn't any real I, there was just the happening. Therefore, here it is. We'll just call it this. And if you will feel it, the going on, which includes absolutely everything you feel, Well, whatever that is, it's what the Chinese call Tao, what Buddhists call suchness, or tathata. And it's a happening. It doesn't happen to you, because where is that? You, what you call you, is part of the happening, or an aspect of it. It has no parts. It's not like a machine. And it's a little scary, because you'd say, well, who's in control around here? Why should there be anyone? Now, that's a very weird notion we have, that processes require something outside them to control them. It never occurred to us that processes could be self-controlling, even though we say to someone, control yourself. We can always, in order to think about self-control, we split a person in two, so that there's a you separate from the self that's supposed to be controlled. Well, how can that achieve anything? How can a noun start a verb? Yet it's a fundamental superstition that that can be done. So you have this process, which is quite spontaneous, going on. We call it life. It's controlling itself. It's aware of itself. It's aware of itself through you. You are an aperture through which the universe looks at itself. And because of the universe looking at itself through you, there's always an aspect of itself that it can't see. So it is like that snake, you see, that is pursuing its tail, because the snake can't see its head, like you can't. We always find, as we investigate the universe, make the microscope bigger and bigger, and we will find ever more minute things. Make the telescope bigger and bigger and bigger, and the universe expands because it's running away from itself. It won't do that if you don't chase it. So, it's very simple. You only have to understand that you can't do anything about it. And as they say in Zen, you cannot take hold of it, but you can't get rid of it. And in not being able to get it, you get it. So all these trials that gurus put their students through have as their ultimate object convincing you that you can't do anything. A guru gives people exercises, A, that are difficult but can be accomplished, and B, that are impossible. You'll always be hung up on the impossible ones, but the possible ones you will get a feeling of making progress, so that you will double your efforts to solve the impossible exercises. And then they range things in many, many ranks and levels through which you can advance. This stage of consciousness, that state of consciousness, or think of the degrees of masonry, or so on. Ranks in learning things, the different belts you get in judo and all that kind of jazz. You can do that. And it gives people this sense of competing with themselves or even with others, because of the feeling inside that there is just something I'm missing. And of course, if you are learning any sort of skill and you haven't perfected the skill, there is indeed something you're missing. But in this thing that we're talking about, that isn't true. Because you, as the Buddhists say, are Buddhas from the very beginning. And all that searching is like looking for your own head, which you can't see and therefore might conceivably imagine that you're lost. So that indeed is the point, that we don't see what looks, and therefore we think we've lost it. And so we're in search of the self, the Atman. Well, that's the one thing we can't find, because we have it. We are it. But we confuse it with all these images. For one thing, the idea of a difference between matter and spirit. This idea doesn't work anymore. Long, long ago, physicists stopped asking the question, what is matter? They began that way. They wanted to know, what is the fundamental substance of the world? And the more they asked that question, the more they realized they couldn't answer it. Because if you're going to say what matter is, you've got to describe it in terms of behavior. And that is to say, in terms of form, in terms of pattern. You tell what it does. You describe the smallest shapes of it that you can see. Atoms, electrons, protons, mesons, all sorts of sub-nuclear particles. But you never arrive at the basic stuff, because there isn't any. What happens is this. Stuff is a word for the world as it looks when our eyes are out of focus. Fuzzy. Stuff, the idea of stuff is that it's undifferentiated, it's some kind of a goo. And when your eyes are not in sharp focus, everything looks fuzzy. When you get your eyes into focus, you see a form, you see a pattern. And so all that we can talk about is patterns. If there is any such thing at all as intelligence and love and beauty, well, you found it in other people. In other words, it exists in us as human beings. And as I said, if it is there in us, it is symptomatic of the scheme of things. We are as symptomatic of the scheme of things as the apples are symptomatic of the apple tree or the rose of the rose bush. The earth is not a big rock infested with living organisms, any more than your skeleton is bones infested with cells. The earth is geological, yes, but this geological entity grows people. And our existence on the earth is a symptom of the solar system and its balances, as much as the solar system in turn is a symptom of our galaxy. And our galaxy in its turn is a symptom of the whole company of galaxies. Goodness only knows what that's in. But you see, when as a scientist you describe the behavior of a living organism, you try to say what a person does. It's the only way in which you can describe what a person is. Describe what they do. Then you find out that in making this description, you cannot confine yourself to what happens inside the skin. In other words, you can't talk about a person walking unless you start describing the floor. Because when I walk, I don't just dangle my legs in empty space. I move in relationship to a room. And so in order to describe what I'm doing when I'm walking, I have to describe the room. I have to describe the territory. So in describing my talking at the moment, I can't describe this just as a thing in itself, because I'm talking to you. And so what I'm doing at the moment is not completely described unless your being here is described also. So if that is necessary, if in other words, in order to describe my behavior, I have to describe your behavior and the behavior of the environment. It means that we've really got one system of behavior. That what I am involves what you are. I don't know who I am unless I know who you are. And you don't know who you are unless you know who I am. There was a wise rabbi once said, if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I and you are not you. In other words, we're not separate. We define each other. We're all backs and fronts to each other. You know, you can't, for example, have two sticks. You lean two sticks against each other and they stand up because they support each other. Take one away and the other falls. They interdepend. And so in exactly that way, we and our environment, and all of us and each other, are interdependent systems. We know who we are in terms of other people. We all lock together. And this is, again and again, the serious scientific description of how things happen. And any good scientist knows, therefore, that what you call the external world is as much you as your own body. Your skin doesn't separate you from the world. It's a bridge through which the external world flows into you, and you flow into it. Just, for example, as a whirlpool in water, you could say, because you have a skin, you have a definite shape, you have a definite form. All right? Here is a flow of water, and it suddenly does a whirlpool. And then it goes on. The whirlpool is a definite form, but no water stays put in it. The whirlpool is something the stream is doing. And exactly the same way, the whole universe is doing each one of us. And I see you today, and I recognize you tomorrow, just as I would recognize a whirlpool in a stream. I'd say, oh yes, I've seen that whirlpool before. It's just near so-and-so's house on the edge of the river, and it's always there. So in the same way, when I meet you tomorrow, I recognize you. You're the same whirlpool you were yesterday. But you're moving. The whole world is moving through you. All the cosmic rays, all the food you're eating, the stream of steaks and milk and eggs and everything is just flowing right through you. When you're wiggling the same way, the world is wiggling, the stream is wiggling you. But the problem is, you see, we haven't been taught to feel that way. What do I want? The answer is, I don't know. When Bodhidharma was asked, who are you? Which is another form of the same question. He said, I don't know. Planting flowers to which the butterflies come. Bodhidharma says, I know not. I don't know what I want. Well, when you don't know what you want, you've reached the state of desirelessness. When you really don't know. You see, there's a beginning stage of not knowing, and there's an ending stage of not knowing. In the beginning stage, you don't know what you want because you haven't thought about it, or you've only thought superficially. And then when somebody forces you to think about it and go through and say, yeah, I think I'd like this, I think I'd like that, I think I'd like the other, there's the middle stage. Then you get beyond that. Say, is that what I really want? In the end you say, no, I don't think that's it. I might be satisfied with it for a while, and I wouldn't turn my nose up at it, but it's not really what I want. Why don't you really know what you want? 2 reasons that you don't really know what you want. Number 1, you have it. Number 2, you don't know yourself, because you never can. The Godhead is never an object of its own knowledge. Just as a knife doesn't cut itself, fire doesn't burn itself, light doesn't illumine itself. It's always an endless mystery to itself. I don't know. And this I don't know, uttered in the infinite interior of the spirit, this I don't know is the same thing as I love, I let go, I don't try to force or control. It's the same thing as humility. And so the Upanishads say, if you think that you understand Brahman, you do not understand. And you have yet to be instructed further. If you know that you do not understand, then you truly understand. For the Brahman is unknown to those who know it, and known to those who know it not. And the principle is that any time you, as it were, voluntarily let up control, in other words, cease to cling to yourself, you have an access of power. Because you're wasting energy all the time in self-defense, trying to manage things, trying to force things to conform to your will. The moment you stop doing that, that wasted energy is available. And therefore, you are, in that sense, having that energy available, you are one with the divine principle. You have the energy. When you're trying, however, to act as if you were God, that is to say, you don't trust anybody and you're the dictator and you have to keep everybody in line, you lose the divine energy. Because what you're doing is simply defending yourself. So then, the principle is, the more you give it away, the more it comes back. Now you say, I don't have the courage to give it away. I'm afraid. And you can only overcome that by realizing you better give it away because there's no way of holding on to it. The meaning of the fact, you see, that everything is dissolving constantly, that we're all falling apart, we're all in a process of constant death, and that the worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two is gone. You know, all that Omar Khayyam jazz. You know, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the great globe itself, I, all which it inherits, shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. All falling apart. Everything is. That's the great assistance to you. See, that fact that everything is in decay is your helper. That is allowing you that you don't have to let go because there's nothing to hold on to. It's achieved for you, in other words, by the process of nature. So once you see that you just don't have a prayer, it's all washed up, and that you will vanish and leave not a rack behind, and you really get with that, suddenly you find you have the power, this enormous access of energy. If you ever do momentarily slip into some sort of mystical experience, you become aware of this tremendous gamesmanship going on. And you see it as sort of continuous with all sorts of cosmic games that are going on, of creatures eating other creatures up, and the creatures that get eaten, of course, transform themselves into the creatures that eat them, and then in turn eat other creatures. And you see the whole hide-and-seek game going on, and then you realize very clearly that the state of development that you are in now is no better and no worse than anybody else's state. Because it's like space again. Which planet is in, or which star is in the best position? Well, it's all equal. Any point on a sphere is the center of the surface of the sphere. So, in the same way, everybody, in all his behavior, whatever he's doing, whether we call him from a certain point of view sick, or whether we call him healthy, whether we call him good or bad, neurotic, normal, psychotic, sane, all the manifestations are just like the leaves on the trees. And in each being in a unique way is, as Christians would say, manifesting the will of God. So that really, from that point of view, there is nothing to do to attain Buddhahood. Nothing at all. But you see, that's very difficult to understand, because a lot of people, when they hear that there's nothing to do, try to do nothing. And you can't. Because you are karma, and karma means action. You can't do nothing. But the thing you're looking for, or think you're looking for, is what you're doing. Is what's called you. Only, of course, as we all know, we've got ourselves into the idea that oneself is so difficult to see. Because it's like, as I've often said, trying to bite your own teeth or look into your own eyes, and you can't find it. It's always behind. It's like your head is, from the optical point of view, a blank space. Neither light nor dark. It's right in the middle of everything. And so, one of the great tricks of gurus is to set people looking for their heads. There's a famous story of a king in India in ancient times called Yajnadatta. And one morning he woke up and reached out for his mirror and brought it over. No head. He was looking in the wrong side of the mirror. And you know, he was kind of bleary-eyed and had a hangover. So he summoned servants and said, "Ye gods, I've lost my head. Find it." And they said, "But Your Majesty, it's there on your shoulders." He said, "It is not. I can't see it in the mirror. Nobody can show me my head." So they were rushing all over the place. looking for the head. Now the trick to that is, of course, that you are perfectly well aware of your head, only not in a form in which you expect to be aware of it. You expect to be aware of your own head in the same way as you're aware of other people's heads. But that wouldn't be true of you, because you've got an inside view on your head. You have an outside view on other people's heads, because, of course, you're taking an inside point of view. But the way in which you are aware of your head is in terms of what you are seeing and hearing. Because all sights and all sounds are what the nerves inside your head are doing. That's how to be aware of one's head. You are aware, therefore, of yourself, the mysterious self that you have, in terms of experience. Because there isn't really any difference. But that always escapes people, you see. So perpetually, so long as you don't understand that, you can be talked into going on to all kinds of weird excursions. And just so long as you believe it, you're a sucker. You're hooked. And it takes a tremendous inner confidence and nerve finally to say, hey, don't pull that stunt on me anymore. I see through your game. Because gurus are very clever at putting you down, but they're just trying to see how strong you are, testing you out, see if they can hoodwink you. So long as they can, you see, they're going to go on doing it, because they're going to get you to the point where they can't do it to you anymore. Then they'll graduate. And so one of Rinzai's students, after he saw through it, said, well, there wasn't much in Rinzai's Buddhism after all. Of course there wasn't. He said boldly and straight out, my teaching is just like using an empty fist to deceive a child. play games with the child and pretend you've got something here. The child goes into all kinds of tizzy to get you to open your hand and show what it is, and then there's nothing. Fooled. So you can be fooled, as long as you can be fooled. When you can't be fooled, you don't ask the question anymore, because it's all become clear. It's all become clear that there is no puzzle about this universe. What makes you think there are puzzles about this universe? Very simple reason. You're trying to explain it. And when you explain things, what do you mean by explanation? There are several meanings of explanation. There's really one basic meaning. But first of all, to be able to translate what is happening into terms of words or numbers. In other words, to describe. But a real explanation is not just a description. It's a description which enables us to control what we are describing. But didn't we see in the last session that to control the world is not really what we want to do? So that if all explanations have as their function enabling us to control things, then maybe an explanation isn't what we wanted. And furthermore, you can very simply see that what makes things complicated is explaining them. When somebody explains to you how a flower works, and he's a great botanist, and analyzes all the innards of a flower, and shows the channels, the fibers, the processes of reproduction, and so on that go on in it, everybody stands fascinated. See how complicated that is. How clever God must have been to create that flower, to have all that complexity going. It isn't complicated at all. It's only complicated when you start thinking about it. Because the vehicle of words is a very clumsy one. And when you try to talk about the processes of nature, what is complicated is not the processes of nature, but trying to put them into words. That's as complicated as trying to drink up the ocean with a fork. It takes forever. And so this intense complexity that we see in everything is created by our attempt to analyze it all. And so what we do is, you see, when we analyze, we use our eyes and ears as scalpels, and we dissect everything. And we have to put a label on every piece we chop off. And so we scalpelize, and we get it right down to atoms, getting finer and finer, and we suddenly thought, well, we've got to the end of it, because the word atom means what is not cuttable, atomos. But then we found we could cut the atom, and lo and behold, big fleas had little fleas upon their backs to bite them. And it goes on forever. There is no end to the minuteness which you can unveil through physical investigation, for the simple reason that the investigation itself is what is chopping things into pieces. And the sharper you can sharpen your knife, the finer you can cut it. And the knife of the intellect is very sharp indeed. And the sophisticated instruments that we can now make, there's probably no limit to it. But in a way, all that is vain knowledge. In a way. Because you see, what it does is it gives you the illusion that you've solved your problems. When you have controlled certain things and you have solved certain problems, practical problems, you say, fine, more of that, please. Let's go on solving problems. And then you do.
Back in 1958, I was in Zurich, and there met a most extraordinary man by the name of Karlfried von Dürkheim. He was a former German diplomat who had studied Zen in Japan. And when he came back after the war, he opened a meditation school and retreat in the Black Forest. And he said, well, I tell you what, a lot of my work has to do with people who went through spiritual crises during the war. And he said, you know, we all know that when a person's in an absolutely extreme situation and they accept it, there is a possibility of a natural satori. And that's what I mean when I was explaining that when one gets to an extreme, that is to say, to the point where you realize that there is nothing you can do about life, nothing you could not do about life, then you're the mosquito biting the iron bull. Well, so in the same way he said, look, You heard a bomb coming at you. You could hear it whistle. And you knew it was right above you and headed straight at you and that you were finished. And you accepted it. And suddenly, there was this strange feeling that everything is absolutely clear. You suddenly see that there isn't a grain of dust in the whole universe that's in the wrong place. That you understand completely, absolutely, totally what it's all about. Because you can't say what it is. But he said in so many cases the bomb was a dud and they lived to tell the tale. Or he said you were in a concentration camp. You've been there so long that you gave up all hope whatsoever, ever getting out. You were just going through this miserable, boring, degrading grind, week after week after week. Nobody paid the slightest attention to you as an individual. You knew you would never get out, and you accepted it. And suddenly, something changed. It's an extraordinary feeling. Freedom. He said you were a displaced refugee. You had lost your family. You didn't know whether they even existed. You were miles from your home. You didn't know whether it existed. You had lost your job, your very identity. You were absolutely nowhere, and you accepted it. And suddenly, you were as light as a feather and free as the air. Now he said, so many people have had those experiences and they talk about them to their families and friends and they say, oh, well, you were under terrific pressure and you probably had some hallucination, you know? Well, he said, I am showing those people that so far from having a hallucination, those were the few occasions in which they woke up. So, you see, this is always the opportunity presented by death. That if one can go into death with eyes open and have somebody help you, if necessary, to give up before you die, this extraordinary thing can happen to you. So that from your standpoint, in that position at that time, you would say, I wouldn't have missed that opportunity for the world. Now I understand why we die. The reason we die is to give us the opportunity to understand what life's all about. By letting go. Because then we come to a situation that the ego can't deal with. When we are no longer hypnotized by that, then our natural consciousness can see clearly what all this universe is for. So, therefore, we have missed this golden opportunity by institutionalizing death out of the way, instead of having a socially understood acceptance of death and rejoicing in death. Now, I could imagine that one person would want to rejoice in death in an entirely different way from another. Like, say, a wedding is a rite of passage. There are certainly some forms of celebrating a wedding which I would find a total bore and quite offensive. Other ways would be very good. I would enjoy it. So everybody, in other words, I'm not saying that you've got to get mixed up with a lot of people coming, laughing around you and giving you presents and cards and everything because you're going to die. But I'm only indicating a general thing, that the doctor, the ministers, the psychiatrists, and above all, us, really owe it to our friends to work out an entirely new approach to death. Because what has happened, you see, from earliest childhood, the child learned that great uncle was dying and saw the family put on long faces and say, oh, that's too bad. Even Christians who think they're going to go to heaven, you know, they get absolutely morbid, more so than anybody else, about death, because heaven, as they all know, is a very boring place. And so this frightful thing, one understands that for the living, to lose someone you love, or even for a dying person to worry about what on earth my wife, my children, my whatever are going to do without me. One can understand a certain worry in that. But nobody is indispensable. And there comes a point when you have to say, I'm sorry, but I am completely going to abandon responsibility for anything. Because there is no further way I can do it. This is another way of that surrender. And then the curious thing that occurs is the moment all that is dropped, suddenly it dawns on you that to be important, existence does not have to go on any longer than a moment. Quantitative continuity is of no value. How long can you hold your breath? Who cares? So it follows from that, you see, that if any one of us, without being shocked into it by being bombed or put in a concentration camp, could at this moment be as one about to die, genuinely and honestly, we would understand the mystery of life. Because death is in a certain sense, the source of life.
Live TV from 85 plus channels with local sports and news. YouTube TV. Try it free.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Broderick, and we have some super exciting news to share with you. I'm sure many of you did not expect us to be going live right now, but we have so much happening at RSBN. We wanted to come on and just tell you some of the things that we have going on and get viewer feedback. So the first thing I guess we should talk about is instead of having one anchor on, like me during the day doing the live broadcast, we're going to start having two. And that second person is going to be our own CEO, Joe Seals. Joe, are you there?
I am here, Tara.
So that is one of the first things we're going to happen. We're going to have Joe Seals on with us. So if you can see, he's created some amazing graphics, some cool screens, and he's going to be on and I'm going to be on, and we're going to be going back and forth talking about whatever breaking news is going to be happening that day. And we're going to have the same type of format. So if something happens, we're still going to come on, but instead of it being just me, Joe's going to join me. And we have all these awesome things happening. I think it's going to make the shows more exciting, more lively, and I'm just really excited for it.
Yeah, Tara, well, I never thought I would actually be on air and doing this. It's something that I definitely have never necessarily wanted to do, but it's a cool experience, and I think I'm going to try my hand at it, and it's exciting to be with you, and to introduce all the things that we have coming up on RSBN. And as I go through here, I want to show people kind of the way that we're going to start covering things live is going to be a little bit differently. We're going to have, instead of seeing one standard shot of somebody in a studio, which can get a little bit boring after a while, we're going to have all kinds of different scenes in our broadcast, sort of to lighten things up, to brighten things up. And we have different options that we're going to go to with different feeds and things like that. We also have a new format where we're going to be able to show you and bring you live video in real time as it happens on breaking news feeds. So we're going to start with, we have a standard shot here of me here in the studio, and actually back here, and I know my audio probably isn't perfect yet, but I've got a microphone on the way. It's going to be professional set up in here with one of those fancy microphone arms and everything. So we'll have that, but I have a full shot of me here. I got a full shot of Tara there in the studio. We have a shot of me here, and then Tara in a box, and then vice versa here. Hello. And then we have our split screen. We also have our window where we can show you the things that are happening on Twitter, such as the the breaking news and things like that we're known for. And also we have different things that we'll be bringing you to, as well as like here we have our three-way. This is a three-way split screen, which I've never had before. Just got through designing this. We got Tara, we got me, we've got the Capitol over on the right-hand side of the screen, which we'll use to maybe bring in additional guests or bring you live video as well. So going to be really exciting. It's exciting for me to debut all this, and we're gonna try to do this every day. We wanted to come on and sort of get all of your thoughts on this new format, and also see if you had any ideas for us. If you do, you're welcome to talk about them in the chat room, or you can send us an email at feedback@rsbn.tv. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited. Joe is absolutely amazing at all this stuff. He created all these graphics by himself. It's truly amazing. And speaking of special guests, I know Joe has someone he wants to introduce a little bit later on, so stay tuned. You don't want to miss out on that. And some other things we have coming up for RSBN is we thought about starting in the morning and in the afternoon doing a type of show that kind of, I don't know, how do I say this? We kind of run through some of the top stories that maybe we didn't necessarily get to go live about. So, throughout the day we'll go live if this happens and this happens, but there's so much news out there, so we kind of wanted to do a show in the morning that kind of shows maybe what's going to be happening during the day, some top stories that might have happened last night that we didn't get to cover, and then do one in the afternoon as well that says like maybe what happened during the day previously before, or what you can expect to happen that night, or just so that we can come on live more and give you more coverage of news. Because if we're just doing strictly breaking news, then we're only going to get to go live just a few times during the day. But if we're doing a story at the beginning and a story at the end, you can get all your bases covered, and we can cover so many more stories.
I mean, we, as you all know, we used to have original programming, and we had to sort of cut a lot of that out because of budget restrictions and YouTube censorship and just the cost of producing the programs were just they far outweighed the amount of revenue that we were able to bring in to be able to survive and as a company. So we had to cut a lot of that stuff. But we have now, I think, we found a way that we can bring original programming back to Right Side without having a fancy office and a big studio like we used to have. This obviously is my studio here, office, and Tara's in our Studio B in Birmingham. But we actually are working on a number of new original programming, including a morning show, and not just our morning show here. We're working on a morning sort of a morning drive time, sort of an FM radio format, and which I'm really excited to announce that will feature a bunch of new hosts as well, who will be in a really professional studio, professionally produced, and things like that. So excited that's going to happen. Tara and I will be going live throughout the day. We'll also be having a sort of a broadcast most evenings, sort of the news that you didn't hear of the day kind of segment, where we kind of break down the stories that we did not get to cover during the course of the day. So that all in addition to our live coverage of rallies and live events across the country.
Yeah, no, we got some exciting things happening. And Joe, do we even know what we're going to call the morning show or the afternoon show?
I don't know, Tara. I think that that's something maybe the viewers might want to weigh in on. I'm working on graphics and things like that for it already, but I'd like to, we've kind of thrown around a few names together, but I would like to sort of get that set in stone. So if anybody has any ideas, feel free to comment in the chat.
Yeah, send your feedback, because I want to get the show named. I think it's going to be exciting, and I don't think it'll be that long. It'll just kind of like a short thing you can watch in the morning, get the rundown of the day, and then a short thing you can watch in the afternoon and just get another rundown, just bringing you more news. It's going to be really fun. And speaking of news today, we are covering President Trump is speaking at a pro-life gala tonight. I think it's at, let's see,
it'll be 7:30 Eastern time, and so 6:30 here our time, Central time.
Yeah, so that is an event that we're covering tonight. That's going to be really exciting, and it'll be our first time co-anchoring together.
I'm excited about it. I appreciate people being so patient. One of the things that we were discussing is that this is not something that is easy to do. I will say that. I don't know how Steve Lookner, who was with us before, did a fantastic job, but it took him a long time to learn and to get into the groove of things and to do it flawlessly like he did. But this is definitely not easy to do when you are not scripted and you don't have, you don't know from 1 minute to the next what's going to happen. And so I think, the more people that we have, doing these things, the better, and it will improve our format and our coverage a lot. And so, we're not trying to be Fox News, and we're not trying to be CNN. We're not trying to be any of those people. What we want is to offer an alternative to that. We are real people. This isn't scripted. This is a very laid-back atmosphere here at RSBN. Is we like to have you, the viewers, help us cover the news. And I think that is sort of the way of the future as the dinosaurs in the mainstream media begin to lose their ratings and disappear. You're seeing people cancel cable and satellite at a record rate, and so we're excited to be able to bring you this kind of coverage, and so it's going to be fun. I'm excited about it, Tara.
Yeah, that's something I'm really excited about for RSBN. What a lot of people don't understand is that RSBN, we don't read a teleprompter. We're not like the mainstream media, so where they'll have a teleprompter in front of them and they have someone who wrote exactly what they need to say and when they say it and how fast they need to talk and words they need to slow down on. We don't have that. We're completely free scripted. So something happens, we come on live within 20, 30 minutes, and we're talking about it. And when there's updates, we have our computer right here. We're pulling up updates, bringing that to you live. And I think that's what makes RSBN so different. It's more personable. We have the chats pulled up. We are able to talk back with our viewers. So it's not like mainstream media where they're telling you something, reading a teleprompter, and then they're done. I think that's what makes it so different, and that's why I love RSBN, because we're just so, it's personable. But then again, too, that's what makes this job honestly really hard at the same time, because I don't have a teleprompter to read, and we're not. That's how we're trained in school. You know, in journalism, broadcast majors, we're trained to read a teleprompter, or we're trained to type up a script and have that in front of us. And so it's been a huge transition for me to go to this type of format, but I love it, and I think it's where a lot of the media is going to go in the future.
You know, when you have a scenario like breaking news where things are coming in every minute, when you see Fox or MSNBC or any of those channels, they are sitting at that news desk and they're being fed information, and a lot of it is most of it is 100% scripted. I mean, they have a teleprompter and they have people talking in their ears and telling them updates. When we do this here, we are not only completely 100% non-scripted, but we're also having to do our own research as we try to find sources that are telling us what is going on at the event that we're covering. And so that leads to a lot of dead air time, and so hopefully this new two-host format will help us a lot when it comes to that. And like I said, this has all been a big experiment for us, and we've had a lot of success with it, and we're excited to improve on it, make it better, offer more viewer interaction this way. Now you can reach out to two of us on Twitter instead of one. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Joe Seals, that's JoeSeales, or Tara Broderick on Twitter at Tara RSBN.
It's T-E-R-A,
Exactly.
not T-A. No, I think this is going to be fun. It's going to be a new experience, and like Joe said, it's going to cut out on the dead air time. I know, honestly, Steve was great at it, but I was trained to report, and that's it. So we're reporting and researching at the same time, and so I think that's going to help a lot, because if Joe's saying something, I can be researching what's happening live about it, and then we can go back and forth, and I think it's going to take RSBN to the next level.
I certainly hope so.
It'll be great.
Tara, it's this is as I said before, we're continuing to, despite the budget cuts and despite the fact that YouTube has cut off our revenue by 90% from what it was in 2016. We are finding new ways to exist and to be creative and to make these things work. And I think